Fake news is not an entirely new concept. Disinformation has existed for a long time. Stories swirled about the moon landing being a hoax. The Nazis used propaganda to circulate untruths. However, the term became mainstream during the Trump presidency, when he used the term fake news frequently to discredit reports that might cast him in a negative light or didn't align with his vision. And many people latched on, using fake news as the scapegoat to justify their beliefs and prejudices. It bred a newfound interest in conspiracy theories, bolstered by the ease with which one can disseminate content in the digital realm. In recent years, the phenomenon of fake news has exploded through viral stories that get passed around and perceived as truth without any sources to back them up. There are so many, in fact, that I'm going to focus specifically on fake news articles that surfaced during the COVID-19 pandemic, which created a veritable treasure trove of misinformation and public suspicion in and of itself. One of the biggest pieces of fake news to emerge during the pandemic was the theory that the vaccines were going to be used to implant microchips into unsuspecting citizens. It most likely originated on a morning talk show where host Charlemagne intimated that millions of people will line up to take the vaccine, and boom, microchips for all y'all. Sounds like an offhand comment that no sane person would take seriously, right? But the theory gained momentum. This was then reinforced when a Swedish startup company announced that it had created a microchip which could store your health information and be scanned by smartphones to determine a person's vaccination status. Clickbait websites like the Daily Mail ran with it, contributing to the hysteria. It is one of the clearest examples to me of how detrimental fake news stories can be to society. This was during a time when people had been living in lockdown for over a year, desperate to get out into the world and gain back a sense of community. The vaccine was supposed to be an answer to that, and while there has always been an anti-vax community, suddenly people that had received plenty of vaccines prior were against the one that might protect themselves and others from dying needlessly. There are several factors, I think, which make pieces like the one in the Daily Mail have any credence. For one, these articles are seemingly written objectively, not stating any opinions and quoting sources. This makes people feel that it is a reputable news source. At the same time, the quotes they choose are bombastic and ominous. They quoted the Swedish startup as saying, "So, of course, that's how we use this technology today. Next year, we are going to use it for something else." That stood out to me particularly, because for one, it's not actually relevant to the story, and for another, it is perfectly phrased to lend itself to the sort of fear-mongering running rampant in a country that was increasingly distrustful of its government. Even the simple fact that the sentence is structured as "we are going to use it" versus "we might" or "we could" is the kind of thing that could set off paranoia alarm bells and foster the suspicion that there is a greater plan coming down the pipeline and we should all be afraid. Articles get shared frivolously across social media sites. People click on them out of the intrigue of the menacing headlines, and then they just take it at face value without doing any research or verification. And to be fair, that is the system they believe the journalists themselves have taken care of before publishing an article. So if we're supposed to trust journalists, and everyone else you know is sharing the information as truth, then it must be true. It is an interesting juxtaposition of how narratives can cultivate suspicion of one group while deflecting any suspicion that might challenge the information being conveyed by pointing the finger. The reporting of this theory had measurable consequences. An article written in The Verge reported that a survey found that 1 in 14 people believed a tracking chip might be implanted with the vaccine. Another conspiracy theory in the fake news machine related to COVID-19 was that it was developed as a bioweapon to infect humanity. There are various assertions, such as China was testing it and it crossed over to the human population, and a litany of YouTube videos and other media making bold claims about the virus's origins. But it wasn't just conspiracy theorists and amateur gonzo journalists spreading this idea. It was reported by Fox News after a minority staff report by Republican members of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence asserted that despite the intelligence community's report that COVID-19 was not a bioweapon, they believed there were indications COVID-19 could be a part of China's bioweapons research and spilled over to the human population during a lab accident at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This happened in late 2022, and while the article includes the findings of the initial report from the intelligence community, stating there was no evidence that the virus was created or released as a bioweapon, the damage is still done by a mainstream media source of news citing official government documents that indicate the contrary. If the gatekeepers of the media and the government itself don't believe official or scientific reports about the origins of the pandemic, what is anyone else supposed to believe? That's yet another caveat to how damaging fake news can be. It has created a world full of information that people can just cherry pick whether it is believable or not, as it fits in with their values and assumptions about the world. And that mentality spreads just as quickly as the virus itself. Unfortunately, with the widespread conflicting information available online and in the media, probably isn't going anywhere. And even when these articles are removed, the messaging is still prevalent and accepted by word of mouth. The damage is done and lasting, even years later. As a society, maybe the best we can do right now is our due diligence in verifying information before sharing it to the network of people that know and trust us.